Hey there, my name is Shane Craddock, and this is the Inner Edge podcast, where I share a different take on how to lead and live a sustainable, high-performance life. Over the course of different episodes, I'm going to challenge the belief that tension, stress, and struggle are essential to success and creativity. My experience is that there's an easier way, there's a better way, and indeed there's an essential way that we need to explore for the times that we live in. So let's go ahead, let's jump in and explore. Hello there. I have been away for the last couple of days with a group of 8 or 9 business owners, CEOs. They're kind of a part of a service that I give, which is called the Inner Circle. So the focus is on, apart from having, it's almost like a non-executive board of directors for your life as a business person, as a leader. And we meet up maybe once every 2 days over the course of 12 months. Very powerful stuff. And of course, from my perspective, we focus on huge emphasis on the inner as well as the outer. So we're navigating the inner and the outer just like everybody does. But a couple of things came up that maybe have inspired what I'm going to talk about today. At the moment, I'm going to call it "Don't Let This Get in Your Way." So that's the working title. We'll see what it is by the time you see it on the podcast. A lot of what we talked about, because of this time of the year, as I'm recording this, it's early January, and that group, we were looking at clarity on what matters most for the year ahead, business and personal. The personal is really, really key. And 2 of the questions that I led out with were the first 2 questions that I have put into my free gift that I kind of brought out for the last 13 years it's now called the True Success Planner. And if you're listening to this and you're on my mailing list, you probably have already seen it, or maybe perhaps you've got it. We have probably the biggest response to it ever this year, whatever that means. But it's certainly, very encouraging to see people downloading it. It's a simple enough framework. There's a lot of questions that I would reflect on regularly, and it's 23 questions this year to reflect 2023. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, you'll see the link in the show notes. You can access it there for a limited period, certainly up to the end of January, and check it out. But anyway, the first 2 questions are, the first one was, what is true for you now? What is true for you now? We're always changing every year. Things are not the same. But very often we don't reflect on the fact that we have changed, or that things have changed, or perhaps the changes that we're seeing in life bring out changes in us that make us look at things differently. So certainly Shane today in January 23 is not the same Shane as 22. He's certainly not the same Shane as 10 years ago or 20 years ago for that matter, which is a good thing, because I don't want to be the same Shane. I want to be a better version of me. I want to learn what life is putting maybe in front of me as lessons to be learned. I found always that if I go through those pain barriers in particular, I get a lot better. Everything gets better. Anyway, so I was kind of talking to these guys and girls about what is true for them now. Like, what is the reality? And that's a really key question to ask before you start to look at, what do I want to do? What do I want to change? What do I want to grow? What do I want to stop? And then the second question I got them to consider was, what does success mean to you now? Like, what's your definition of success? My definition of success today is a very different definition to what it was when I was 20, 25, 30. It's evolved. I think it's a more rounded definition now. But you have to own your own definition. And without realizing it, we've actually picked up, we're conditioned in taking definitions of success, usually from the society that we grow up in. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be really meaningful to you. And so that's why I'm very focused on raising awareness around true success. Like, what is true success? It's a success that you own, your own definition, and it's true to you, to how you want to live your life, the impact you want to make, the way you want to live. What's true success to you? It has to be unique to you. Anyway, we went through the day with these guys at a very nice hotel, and towards the end, kind of something occurred to me as I was listening to people talk during the day, and maybe probably reflecting my own experience of working with people over the last 20 years, 23 years at this stage, that there's always one thing that gets in the way for most people, and it comes into their ability to set, you could say, goals or direction or things they want to change or create. And then it also affects, it's fine setting these things like people do in January for New Year's resolutions, or I'm going to change the world this year. It's going to be amazing. This time next year, Rodney, that's an Only Fools and Horses joke. If you know what I'm talking about there, good for you. But there is one key, I think, to creating true success, any form of success, even perhaps if it's not true. It's not letting your mind get in the way. Now, you might be listening to this thinking, well, I'm not one of those. And I'm going to say, I disagree. I meet very few people who are not letting their mind get in the way in some area of their life. Some area. Now, we can have a different definition around what the mind is. I suppose, what is the mind? Neuroscientists would say, well, the mind is an extension of the brain. So maybe you could say the brain is the seat of the mind, is what they would say. But whatever it is, to me, the mind is some sort of programmable energy. Because if I say to you, well, what's 5 times 5? You'll surely know what the answer is, right? Why? Because somewhere in you, in your mind, there is a memory of that. And I kind of often imagine that there's like a team inside me, an inner team that can do great things. And they probably control my memory. They affect my self-image. My intellect is in there. My intuition is part of that team. But the problem is that if I don't really lead and manage that team, they can go off and just do whatever they want. Maybe they'll tell me what to do and what to think. And you see, the mind expresses itself through thinking. Now, the fact that you're listening to me, obviously you're listening to me, and maybe I'm trying to provoke your thinking, get past some of the blocks in your mind. That's, if I'm honest, one of the purposes of my podcast. Even though it's limited in terms of what you can do, really, even through a book or an audio like this, you can provoke. But what I would say to you is that I think most people pay way too much respect to their thinking. Because have you ever thought about where is it coming from? Like, where is that thinking coming from? It's coming from your mind, which is kind of a random collection of stuff that's kind of happened to you. A lot of it's useful, but some of it isn't. And if you're not aware what's ticking away at the back of your mind, then that could be a problem, and it generally is. And it's funny, as we went through that session with those leaders, one of them was flagging that they were very aware that there was a fear, there had been a fear at the back of their mind that they weren't fully aware of, but it was much more clear to them because of some circumstances over some recent months. And they realized actually, oh, that fear is there, been influencing me for quite a while, influencing my decisions, how I am with people, what I do or don't do. But they saw it. And they realized actually there was no logic to it. It was from a different version of them, maybe 10 years ago, maybe more. You'd be surprised at how many people I've met over the years where something in their past, even go back to childhood, would impact them and how they run their business, how they deal with people, how they handle stress. It's really incredible what the mind will tell you. But it's based perhaps sometimes on a child's experience from a very different time. And just to kind of bring it into something very practical that I think is universal, think about if you've ever been talking to somebody, and as they're talking, you're very aware that you're only hearing 10%, if anything, of what they're saying, because your mind is either commenting on what they're saying, or else it's just distracted perhaps with something else going on in your world. Maybe something else has just happened and your mind is you're just not present. You're just not present. And that's the mind getting in the way. Most people at the start of a new year will say, yeah, I'm going to make some changes this year. Whether or not you do resolutions, I don't particularly like that myself. I don't think it works. But at the new year, or the turn of a new year, is always a good chance. It's always a good time to think about, well, what am I going to create this year? What would I like to see differently? What would I like to change? But most people will run out of momentum. But what's really happening? At some point, the thinking will come in and sabotage them. That's the mind getting in the way. I think many times a very common thing that I've had with some clients over the years is, as they get to know me and the trust factor increases, they'll probably reveal to me that, look, actually, I've got a fear of public speaking, very common fear. And there are lots of different techniques you can bring in to help somebody calm down and to improve their ability to speak in public. And I've used many of those techniques over the last 20 years for myself, for other people, and they do have an effect. But I realized over time that the highest technique you can actually share with somebody, which perhaps even as you're listening to this may sound too simple, is is to help educate them in what's actually creating that incredible anxiety inside when they even think about that, oh my God, I have to speak in the next 10 minutes. I mean, everybody will get a little bit nervous. I think it's understandable. I've spoken a lot, I speak a lot, and I will still sometimes get the butterflies. But the highest technique you can do is realize that, well, if I don't pay attention to my thinking that's coming up that's causing that anxiety, if I just let it pass through me like a cloud passing along the sky and stay with the feeling, just let it experience it, let it pass through me, it will pass through me, and I will just be calm. So another way of saying that is, if I can relax away from the inner voice, not pay attention to my thinking, not respect my thinking, because it's coming from probably some past experience that I had that was difficult or a problem. And if I keep replaying that in my mind, the way your mind works is, well, then whatever you think in your mind and play in your mind, you're going to feel in your body. There's nothing wrong with feeling anxiety or fear before you speak in public. On some level, it's like a performance anxiety with a great actor about to go on stage. The best of the best will always tell you that they have this feeling before they go on stage. But they just stay with it and then keep moving. I wonder, does that make any sense? Now, I can 100% guarantee you that your mind is getting in the way in some area of your life as you're listening to this. For a business side, it could be, well, how do you see your market? You say, oh, no, this is logic. No. Regardless of what's happening in any given market, whether it's up or whether it's down, there's always opportunity. You might have to think differently, but that's what the best do. The best entrepreneurs I've ever worked with will always kind of go, no matter what's going on, whether it's a global pandemic or a down market, where is the opportunity? That's using the mind, telling your mental team, no, let's focus on trying to find something new. Maybe in business, you have a view of some people. That's probably getting in the way in some cases. What's your view of yourself in the business? What's your view of where you're going? Are you fed up with the business? See, all of this is to do with your thinking. On the personal side, your health, what are you thinking about that? What do you think about your relationships? You know, every relationship, especially your closest relationship, they need work. But what can often get in the way of that work is the way we think about those relationships. And then we think about our thinking about those relationships. We analyze them. We focus on the negative. That to me is the mind getting in the way. It's not to say that you ignore reality, but okay, let's get in touch with reality. But then I don't want to think about it anymore. Let's take some action. Or maybe you're somebody who just hugely values your own opinion, that you always want to be right. The way you see it is the way it is. That to me is the mind getting in the way, and it will cause a problem for you in relationships. Or maybe you failed at something. Maybe you haven't been able to shake off the dirt of that failure in your mind. It still haunts you. It still makes you feel something. You hide it with your face. You put on that mask like that we can all do. But again, that's a legacy thing from the past. If you just stop thinking about it, maybe you can just let it go. That's the mind getting in the way. I'm going to give myself a little plug here for you. It might be of interest to you, and a way to kind of practically put into action getting out of the way of your mind. Because, as I said earlier on, you can only get so much out of a book or even a podcast. And so something I'm doing at the start of February, and it's live now, is a collaboration, something new. It's with a guy called Gary Fox, a great guy who has a podcast called The Entrepreneur Experiment. In Ireland, it's the top independent business podcast, where Gary has spent the last, I think, 3 or 4 years interviewing the best of CEOs and entrepreneurs. Really, really, really clever interviewer. And so what we've done is we've come up with, I have a program called MindShift, which is about putting into action some of the information you've heard over this podcast. Because information is one thing, but it's useless unless you apply it, form a habit of it. So myself and Gary have come together. I've adapted my program specifically around the entrepreneurial mind, for leaders in particular, business owners, people who are ambitious, want to think more entrepreneurially, but to do it in a way where you're tested and challenged to put it into action in real life. I won't say any more, but there's a link in the notes here. But if you're interested in kind of raising your game significantly, it's a virtual program, so you can do it from anywhere in the world. There was a couple of opportunities, if you're in Ireland, to join myself and Gary and the rest of the group in the program for face-to-face stuff as well. But all the details are on the page in the show notes. End of my plug. So we get to the questions. What's impossible for you, but if it happened this year, it would transform everything. Now, most people, their mind will get in the way of that question and won't even let them dream it. So, well, I can't do this because that's not logical, and this won't happen, that won't happen. If you could switch that bit of your mind off and say, but what is impossible? But if it did happen, yeah, that'd be pretty cool. You see, most people, once they kind of get beyond childhood, they seem to switch off the capacity to look at the impossible. Like, what are the possibilities? Instead, as adults, we kind of seem to get conditioned into this plus 10% in life, which isn't the worst. But what if the game was supposed to be plus 50% this year? You see, it's the mind will influence how you see it. Another question that maybe helps here is, if you were braver this year, what would you do? If you were braver, what would you do? Or think about an area that you'd love to really, really change or improve. That you'd really, just to be amazing if I could change myself in this area, improve this, or get this, or feel like this. Look at that, and then watch what your thinking is saying. Is it supporting you? Is your mind helping you? Or is it getting in the way? So you need to tell your mind what's what. You need to tell your mind who's in charge. And that's kind of, I suppose, one of the mantras I'm telling people around me this year. Don't let your mind get in the way. Okay, ciao for now. Bye-bye.